there's an assumption in halakha that you cannot own something that has no value, that ownership is attached to value. If something has no value, you can't, the laws of ownership don't apply. That creates a problem in another area of halakha, which is you can only be over on the isur of chometz, you can only transgress the prohibition of owning chametz during Pesach if you own it, if it is yours. That's why we sell chometz before Pesach. If it doesn't belong to you, you're not over on the issue of Bal Yiroi and Bal Yimatzeh. There's a third principle, which is chometz on Pesach is also bahano. You can't have benefit from chometz on Pesach. So what happens if you get access to chometz on Pesach? A non-Jew gives you a present, and it's a wonderful bottle of whiskey, and he gives it to you on Pesach. So it's also bahano for you. You can't get any pleasure of it. If you can't get any pleasure from it, you can't own it. If you can't own it, you're not over on it. It kind of creates an interesting paradox in halakha, which leads us to a new understanding of ownership in our sugya, which is ownership and value. Gazera Dilma Magbala in Avodah Zarah Daf Mem Beis Amud Aleph. And this is a case where we have all of these personalities, Rishonim and Achronim, coming into our Beis HaMedrash, each one explaining things a little bit more clearly than the generation before them. As you'll see, we'll start with the Ramban from the 13th century, and we go through to his Talmud, the Rashba, also the 13th century, and then we go to the Ritvo in the 14th century, and the Ran, and eventually even to the Achronim. Let's try and understand this. The Gemara talks here about the fact that Oved kechavim mevatel avodat kechavim shelo v'shel chaviro, v'Yisrael ena mevatel avodat kechavim shelo oved kechavim. A non-Jew can annul, can destroy the idolatry value of an idol, and then it's no longer an idol, as we learned yesterday. A Jew can't do that. A Jew can't be mevatel the avodah zarah of a non-Jew. He can't take that avodah zarah value out of it. Asks the Gemara, we had the case yesterday, according to Reish Lakish, that if an idol just collapses, it just disintegrates, and there are now pieces all over the place, Reish Lakish says, Mutter, this is no longer idolatry because the form of the idol is no longer present. In that case, asks the Gemara on Reish Lakish, if a Jew came and smashed an idol, and now they're just fragments all over the place, surely that's the same. Surely the idol worshipper would then say, if this idol couldn't protect himself against the Jew, how can he protect me? So the same principle applies. Surely the idolatrous meaning attached to these fragments is no longer there because there is no meaning to an idol that couldn't take care of itself. Gemara discusses, Abai gives one answer. Rava says, you're right. Technically speaking, if a Jewish person smashed an idol, the pieces would have no idolatrous value. However, there was a gazera, Dilmah Magbala V'Hada Mevatila. The Chachomim introduced a gazera in case the Jew would pick up the pieces and do the bitul afterwards. So now the Jew has picked up this fragment of idol, and he wants to be mevatel either, but now it belongs to him. Now it's his. It's no longer a non-Jew's idol. This is now his idol. And if it belongs to him, you can't be mevatel it. There's nothing you can do. So we're worried about a technicality that could occur, that by picking up the fragment and acquiring the rights to the fragment, he makes it impossible to nullify the idolatry. And so we say that a Jewish person can't nullify the idolatry. The idol belongs to a non-Jew. The question that the Rishonim deal with is, but it's an Isur Hano. The Jew is not allowed to get benefit from this fragment. If you're not allowed to get benefit from the fragment, there can't be ownership. If there can't be ownership, what's Rava worried about? What are we worried about? That he might acquire ownership to it and then try to be mevatel and then try to nullify it. It's too late. You can't nullify it if you already own it. But ask the Rishonim, he can't possibly own it because it's asur b'hana. You can't own something that has no value. So it's interesting. We go through the Rishonim. It's interesting. The Ramban talks about this in Hilchos Psochim because this is exactly the din that relates to the Chometz on Pesach issue, and they learn the one from the other. That's why it's relevant here. And in Psochim and Daf Dalet in Psochim, the Ramban simply says, "Vim tomar in zechiyah b'isur hana'ah." If you say, how can a Jewish person acquire chometz on Pesach? It's also bahano. He's not allowed to have benefits, so it has no value. If it has no value, how can you acquire it? I'm reading gzera dlelmah mגבה והודו מבטל והביא לעבודה זרה בדיסרו וכל עבודה זרה בדיסרו אין לה בטל העולמות וכל שכן חומש שאין ביטולו מתחילה. Says the Ramban, you see from our Gemara here on Avodah Zarah Daf Mem Beis that it is possible. What does it mean it is possible? We know that it's not possible to own something that has no value. Says the Ramban, you see from Avodah Zarah that there are cases when that's all he says. If we only had that Ramban, it would be very difficult to know what he meant. But now we go to the Talmudim of the Ramban. Sometimes it's helpful when the early authorities are very, very economical on words to the point where we can't really understand what they're saying, to go to their Talmudim, and their disciples explain it a little bit more. So there's a tshuva of the Rashba that deals with exactly the same question. And he says, "Uchinyan shamru ba'avodah zarah she'af al pi she'asura bahana ve'i efshar lo lezakot ba mikol makom." Even though a piece of idol is forbidden to have benefit from it, so it has no commercial value, you can't use it, and you can't sell it, and you can't give it away, you can't do anything with it, so you can't own it. Nevertheless, says the Rashba, who is a Talmud of the Ramban, Kol sheda'ato lizkot ba'avodah zarah d'Yisrael karube. It's considered to be his, if his intention is to own it. So the Ramban introduces another level of ownership that's not commercial ownership. You're not a commercial owner, you're not a legal owner, but you're a spiritual owner. From the halachic point of view of the laws of Avodah Zarah, you have certain rights in it. We'll have to see why. What are those rights? But the Torah considers you an owner. He's explaining his Rebbe, the Ramban. Comes the Ritva and explains it a little further. The Ritva is a Talmud of the Rashba. And the Ritva says, even though when the Jewish person picks up this fragment of idol, it's forbidden to have benefit from it, so it has no commercial value. Yisrael zoche b'isurei hana'ah. A Jew can get rights in something which has no value because it's forbidden to benefit from it. Lechashva shelo, so notice he used a similar phrasing, to consider it as if it is his. The same as the Rashba said, the Yisrael karube, it's considered, it's called his, although it isn't technically his. Lohosif bahem isur, for the purpose of adding isur. So when the Torah introduces an isur, a prohibition, for which you need to be an owner, the Torah is saying in this particular circumstance you can own it, even though it's also bahano. The Torah is making an exception here to say that although you cannot commercially own it, for the purposes of prohibitions, we're going to consider you the owner. And this applies in these two areas, Avodah Zarah. So the Avodah Zarah is forbidden, it has no value because you can't get benefit from it. If you can't get benefit from it, you can't own it. Now the Jew picks it up with the intention of owning it, says the Torah, okay, we're going to consider you the owner of it. And now you can't be mevatel, now you can't nullify it at all. But the Ran, also a Talmud of the Rashba, explains it a little differently, and he says, even though this is not considered a financial asset, because you cannot get benefit from it, so it has no value, it cannot be sold, it cannot be traded, and if it can't be traded, it has no value, and therefore it's not considered mammon, it's not considered an asset, so how can you own it? Since a non-Jew could be mevatel it, there is some value to it. It's not that this object has no value to anybody. This object, before it was yours, any non-Jew could have come and be mevatel it, and then it would have had normal commercial value to you or to anybody else. The prohibition would have been removed by the non-Jew nullifying his own idolatry. It's just you that can't nullify the idolatry. Since the non-Jew can nullify it, it has value. And that's why chometz on Pesach, the same kind of things apply. The Ran goes a little bit further and is now explaining that there's an element of the fact that the non-Jew can remove the idolatrous prohibition from it, and once he does that, it becomes mutter. And the Ran says that on a piece of Gemara that's on the next daf, on Daf Mem Gimel, where there's a case of, when we might deal with it tomorrow, where one of the Amoraim finds a precious ring in the street, but it seems to have the design of Avodah Zarah on it, and he gets hold of a non-Jew, and he asks the non-Jew to be mevatel, to be mevatel the Avodah Zarah from the ring, so that he can then be zoch, he can then acquire the ring. So that there is this capacity for a non-Jew to acquire it. We go a little bit further with Rabbi Kiva Eger in the Gilayon Hashas on our page, where he simply says, on Rashi, who implies that this only works if the fragment is hefker. Nobody owns the fragment. The thing has been shattered. There's just these fragments of idolatry on the ground. A Jew comes and picks it up. Nobody owns it. So now the Jew picks it up. He's zoche from hefker. He's getting this fragment of Avodah Zarah from hefker. It's ownerless. It doesn't belong to anybody. But the Rabbi Kiva Eger references a Magen Avram, so now we're in the 17th century, who says on Tafkuf Pevov, what does the Magen Avram say? Vahatam. No, this can be acquired even if it belongs to a non-Jew. This law would still apply, that the Jew could pick it up and be zoiche, he could acquire it. Kivan da Yisrael chayav ba'achriyuto mikri shelo. This is called his because his chayav ba'achriyuto means if he loses it or destroys it or give it away, he has to replace it to the non-Jew who originally owned it. So the non-Jew owns this piece of idolatry. The non-Jew could be mevatel it, and then it doesn't have idolatry. The Jew takes it, let's say, and destroys it or gives it away or whatever. The non-Jew claims it back. The Jew has to replace it. So the Magen Avram is introducing an amazing concept based on this comment of the Ran. What does the Ran say? Kivan sheyechola leitbatel al yedei oved kochavim matzi zachiba. Since an Oved Kochavim, since the non-Jew has the capacity to remove the idolatrous dimension of this thing, and now it becomes an ordinary commodity that can be traded, therefore it does have sufficient potential value for the Jew to be able to own it. What we see in this Magen Avram is a redefinition of ownership. We thought that ownership means you have rights in an object. What does ownership give you? It's mine. This belongs to me. I have rights in the object. And therefore, if I have no rights in the object because it's asur b'hana, the Torah says nobody can have any rights in it. Nobody can get benefit from it. Then no human being, no Jew can have rights in it either. If I can't have rights in it, I can't have ownership in it. No, says the Magen Avram. What we see from this Gemara is that ownership is not about the rights that you have in something, it's about the responsibilities you have. And there can be a situation where you don't have any rights, but you do have responsibilities. For example, our very case. You don't have rights in this piece of Avodah Zarah because it's Avodah Zarah, it's also Ba'anoi, you can't do anything with it. However, if you destroy it, or let's say even more so, if somebody else steals it from you, so now, non-Jew owns the idol. Idol gets shattered, or the Jew shatters the idol. There are now fragments on the floor. The Jew takes the fragment. What would happen if somebody else comes and steals the fragment from him? It was a jade Buddha. The fragments are valuable, but they're not valuable to the Jew because he can't do anything with it. He can't sell it. He can't trade it. What happens if a non-Jew comes and steals it from him? And now the original owner says, I'm missing a fragment of my Buddha. It's precious jade, you owe me money. Chayav b'achriyuto. The Jew would have to compensate the non-Jew. So although the Jew could get no value for himself, he does have responsibility, chayav b'achriyuto. And ownership then is not so much about what rights you've got in something. Ownership is about what responsibilities you've got in something. And we won't have time to go into an amazing Reb Shimon Shkop. Maybe we'll have a chance to go into it on a different sugya, where Reb Shimon explains this in such magnificent detail. But let's pause just with the idea that when we think of ownership, we tend to think, now it's mine. Now I've got the rights to it. Yeah, that's true in most cases. But what about the responsibilities you've got for something? We do that, sometimes we do that with children. The child wants a puppy, and we say, who's going to look after it? Who's going to be responsible for it? It's all very well, I want the puppy, I want the rights to play with the puppy, yeah? And who's going to clean up? And who's going to take it for walks? Their responsibilities as well. And to start thinking of ownership in terms of responsibilities, it also makes it easier to detach ourselves from ownership. There's quite a movement in the world today, as you know, of minimalism, of cutting down on how much stuff we have. The amount of stuff that we have. Simon, you've got a whole business of people who've got stuff they never use. And they pay you to take care of it for them. Stuff they never use. It belongs to them. One has to start looking at stuff as something that has chiyuvim, it has responsibilities, not that it has rights. If owning stuff gives you rights, the more you own, the more rights you've got. You're a bigger balabot. That's the way we normally look at property. We own stuff. But if you look at owning something as a responsibility, as a chiyuv that one has, then one can start moving into minimalism. What responsibilities can I get rid of? What can I do? And now if I have to think, do I give them to Simon for storage, or do I put them on the sidewalk and get somebody to take them away? I'm offloading responsibilities. Why do I want to still stay so responsible? It actually redefines our whole relationship to the material world, to understand that everything we acquire and everything we own attaches a responsibility to us, which we may or may not want. That depends on what kind of benefits we get from it that we have to weigh up. But to think of ownership not just as something we have rights in, but as something we have responsibility for.